Mrs. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins?
Here.
Mr. Jones? Ms. Page?
Here.
Mrs. Quintern?
Here.
Madam Chair, the clerk certifies the presence of a quorum.
Thank you very much. Can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And at this time, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Hopkins, could you proceed?
Yes. I make a motion authorized by section 2.2-3701.3 of the Freedom of Information Act and School Board Policy BDD. I move that Mrs. Clinton be permitted to participate in the meeting electronically, and the minutes show that her request was based on a temporary medical condition that prevented her from attending, and she is participating from home.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to just have an approval of the agenda as presented, please. All in favor, sorry, of the motion to let Ms. Quintern join the meeting by saying aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Now, I need a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
I make a motion we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, and now we'll turn it over to Dr. Hornick.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. And so I will first, proud and happy to introduce two fine gentlemen before you today. Trying to make it feel like you're not in the firing line, guys. So to your left is Dan Wiggin, architect with RRMM. And to your right is Rob Burrs, architect, both principal architects, I believe, correct, with RRMM. And we're really excited to bring them here today so they can provide some narrative and analysis behind the comprehensive report that they put together. This has been a process that has really probably since the beginning of this calendar year, moving back even into late 2022. And we're really hoping that the information that you hear today and then the questions and answer sessions that we're able to have will help advance and move the discussion forward so that we can make ultimately the best choice for the community and for our students here in Orange County. And so we are happy to have RRMM here today. And so with that, I'll be happy to turn it over to you gentlemen. And I believe, so the structures, we were going to start with a report and some narrative and a presentation from the architects, and then Ms. Page will kind of lead the question and answer session from there. So,
okay.
Gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Hornick, and school board and board of supervisors members. Thank you for having us here. As Dr. Hornick said, earlier this year we began working on a study that would bring up some of the options to help advance your desire to expand your CTE program. You have a robust CTE program going on right now, and you want to grow it further to meet the demands, workforce development and options for students. And so Dr. Hornick came to us, I guess, probably since we've been doing work in Orange County for many years. About 10 years ago to the date, our partner Ben Motley was here and worked on a master plan for Orange County, and more recently we've done some design work at connectors at 2 of your elementary schools. And so I guess we had built some trust, and you guys approached us about doing this. And we've done lots of CTE around the state, lots of projects, K through 12 projects around the state, and so this study, including studies like this. And so it was in our wheelhouse, and we were happy to do the work for you. And so we put together a high-level report of options to help move forward your CTE program, physically expanding space for your CTE program. And we'd like to go through this report. I think you guys all have it in front of you, and we'll have it up on the screen here. But really just to make sure you understand our approach to the report. It shouldn't take but maybe 15 or 20 minutes to go through the report and then answer whatever questions you have about it. Is that good?
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you.
So we'll start, and I'll let you advance that if you would. Really, this is the goal of the study was to come up with an objective analysis of viable near and long-term options for expanding your CTE, and as if there was a side effect of providing traditional classroom space for the overcapacity at the high school, that would be a benefit too. To start, we really dove into what you have going on right now with your CTE programming and what you would like to have happen in your CTE programming. Then we came up with 6 or 6.5, 7 as the report shows, 7 options for that. That would fulfill, each one of these fulfill some portion of that or all of it, depending on the option. And then evaluated each of those options, and then at the end we have a conclusion that says, according to what we've studied, here's what we see. So that's the general format of the study. So our first thing that we did, we dove into your programming. As you can see on page 4 of the report, here are all the programs that you have going on right now. And again, it's a robust, kudos to you guys for doing what you have. It looks like 70 different classes that you guys are teaching right now. And from our walking around and seeing all the facilities, you guys are doing an amazing job with what you have. Your future programming, as identified by your leadership, is equally amazing and looks to be what your peers around the state are doing. You're shooting to advanced programs for workforce development, which this report talks about in the very beginning, and we don't need to tell you guys. You need professionals and laborers and technicians and engineers and all of that. And so that's what you're trying to do with your expansion. We spent the first part of our study with your staff and looking at your facilities and finding out what exactly tailored to Orange County that you would need, and create a program, a space program, which is in your report. We do this so that when we evaluate the facilities, we understand how what we're looking at would work with what you want. And so this space program in your report is really an all-out. If you could have everything, you start from there. And then as we evaluate these options, what parts of that all-out program could you have? And so that's that program. Then we went and looked at all of your existing programs. So this is section 4 of your report. What you have going on at the high school now, and what you have going on at the Taylor administration, or here, at the T, and what you have remotely. You have some off-site as well. So the existing site, let's go back to that aerial view. So as what's up on the screen shows, you've got your nursing and business technology and engineering classes here. You've got your ag classes in your classroom there. You've got sports medicine as well here on this campus. And of course your JROTC, which is in the house there, close to Wall Boulevard. You're using approximately 15,000 square feet in the main school. And then you've got about, in your ag space, about 3,400 square feet. Let's see, 6,000 square feet in the ag building and about 3,400 square feet in the JROTC. These spaces, your technical hands-on type CTE spaces, your tech engineering and tech ed stuff are down on the ground level on the backside of the building. We evaluated that space. It's great what you got going on down in there. But it's very cramped, and you're really wanting to grow that. So that was our evaluation. The report gets a lot more technical. But we'll move on to the TEAC. What you have going on here right now is your cosmetology. You have 2 classroom spaces in there, and you are bringing kids over here daily for that program for a block. And it's a very small percentage of this building. But also in this building, as you know, is your administrative facilities on one side of the building, and then you've got your Head Start and pre-K and Boys and Girls Club on the other side of the building. So the building is fairly fully utilized. We did discover approximately, I guess, about 5,000 square feet here that we thought could be optimized. And so we'll talk about that when we get into the different opportunities. So the next section is section 5, and it's where we talk about the 7 opportunities or options. They are not equal in scope. They vary, and so it's by the nature of where they are, whether it's here or a clean open site, for a new building. They're just going to be different, and it gives you a chance to look at opportunities that you have, 7 different opportunities. I can honestly say that none of these opportunities are throwaways. Each one of them are valuable based on what your goals are. And some of the larger, bigger, that seem large, big, and grandiose, each one of those can be done in phases. So you can take them off a piece at a time. So I feel like all 7 of these options are doable. So it's just really for you as a group to decide what makes the most sense. In the 2013 study, the master plan for the high school, it addressed a lot of different issues. Space, needing more space at the high school, and one of them was CTE. And so that this option A is high school renovations and additions. And it really looks back at 2 portions of that study that seemed really valuable and still relevant today. One, a 24,000 square foot addition of classrooms to the front of the building, and about 22,000 square feet of CTE on the backside. And there's some phasing that would have to happen for that, namely moving the tennis courts to the backside of the property, expanding parking there, and then where the students are parking now, that CTE addition would come off the back of the building. So, and then the classroom addition on the front of the building, on Selma Road, there's a nice clean patch of space. It makes a natural addition. Now we say classroom addition, it's still CTE. A good portion of your CTE happens in traditional classroom. It's not as specialized as, let's say, automotive or building trades. And so that could be flexible, both traditional classes and CTE. So that does a lot for your school, present school, and the conditions now. So a little bit of detail given on page 17 of your report, and each one of these goes through your scenario of what you would actually have to do, and then the advantages and the challenges of each one of these options. So I won't go through all the detail of each of these. I just want you to see the layout of each option, how we talk about it. We can talk briefly about the advantages and challenges of each option. So option A, there's no land purchase involved, so you're on site. This option allows bringing the modular classrooms, what's happening in those, into the building and getting rid of the modulars. It allows bringing a lot of your CTE programs that are off-site, bring them on-site and grow your CTE program. It does allow some betterment circulation, site circulation and pedestrian movement around the site. A nice side effect of this is relieving some overcrowding that you have in your high school currently. And this can eliminate a CTE transportation, so taking students off-site and bringing them back takes away valuable education time, and also involves bus drivers and buses and all of that. I would say you're going to see a lot of that through some of these options. Some of the challenges, I think it's not going to be able to get every CTE program you want on site, certainly not in the front, but that's, you could grow over time. It has a higher cost than some of the other options, and it's a major construction project on an occupied school. So that's always a big consideration when you're choosing. I'd like to go on to option B, which is renovations here at T. There's a B and a B1, but basically the gist of this is you got about 83,000 square feet here. There's a few thousand square feet that we think can be optimized. The gist of this is either B1, either B or B1, what do we call it, B1, B2. Something's going to get displaced, and so that's probably the thing that we need to think about most. But in B1, the idea is, as you can see up on your screen, where you've got your Head Start and your Virginia Pre-K Initiative classrooms, and then your Boys and Girls Club, those would be relocated, and you'd move all of your CTE into one space. It's not a bad idea in plan. One of the big challenges we see is the infrastructure here is really not designed for the energy-intensive CTE. And when you're talking about this amount of square footage of CTE, you have to think, well, what are the programs that are dual blocked? So you're not going to be able to take a lot of your programs over here just for one block. You know, it's going to either be the morning or the afternoon. But the space is, it's there. We would, in this option, we would take the gym as high bay space in the back of the building, and then you've got your maintenance shop also back there. That would all be your high bay space, like building trades, automotive, those types of spaces could go back in there. And then you have your classroom type spaces where the Head Start and Pre-K initiative are. You could potentially have culinary arts up front where your kitchen is, because you wouldn't be needing it for Pre-K or Head Start anymore. Perfect culinary arts program up there. And then also there would be space for JROTC. So let's see. In option B2, the idea is, good? The idea in option B2 would be to leave Head Start, Boys Club, and Girls Club where it is, and then relocate the administration and take the space on the right side, pretty much here on this side of the building for CTE. We don't have high bay spaces on this side of the building, so it's not super conducive to a lot of your CTE classes, the automotive, the building trades, mechanical, or HVAC, etc. But it is, I mean, it's an option, so it would leave out a couple of your programs. I think I might have mentioned as I was discussing the advantages and challenges. But the advantages of B1, optimize about 5,000 square feet of space here at Teak. And then I mentioned the challenges of the building system, the HVAC, the electrical really don't have any spare capacity. The relocation of programs or admin if it's B2. The transportation is lost time, and then you got your transportation. And then only the double block courses could be located here. Let's see. And you simply would have to find another place for the programs that are here. So the costs associated with each of these options we have at the end of the report, and we'll go over those. Option C, a new CTE facility on the high school property. Now this is something that in 2011, Brim and Parker did a study on, a nice study about a new CTE facility on that site. We think it's a great option. The transportation and maintenance facility services would need to be relocated, but it looks, it's one of the advantages is all your CTE is in one place. It eliminates the transportation. and then reduces your learning time that's lost during that transportation. And you could also include general classroom space if you needed to. I think your challenges are finding a new location for what's there now. It's a long lead time on your construction. Let me go back to one of the potential advantages of locating here is your lead time. There is some infrastructure challenges, but I think your lead time could be a little bit quicker than some of the longer term ones. So that's another advantage I failed. You could be up and running with some of your programs, assuming you could relocate the folks that are here. But back to option C, challenges of finding another place for transportation and maintenance. And then it is remote. I mean, although it's on your school property, that site is probably about 750 feet from the school. So it's less monitorable as far as keeping eyes on students all the time. So I think that's something that could be addressed, but just something to mention. Option D is the Wall Boulevard property. This connected to the high school or adjacent to the high school. It's approximately 4 acres on the corner. It has about 5 buildings that could house current and future CTE programs. There are many options for what you could put there, and I think the next step would be actually to design around those options. So purchasing the Wall Boulevard property and then connecting it by removing your site fencing and connecting cross-site access is what you would do there. Some of the advantages, it's a fairly low-cost solution to expanding your CTE program. It's adjacent to your property. It kind of completes what you have as a campus. So you've got lots of other opportunities, whether it becomes CTE and other things, or it allows other things to happen on your site if you wanted to, sports fields or additional parking or whatever. It's a very quick way to expand your CTE. Obviously, you're on site, so you're reducing or eliminating transportation and the lost time for learning. And you can release some pressure on your high school by relocating spaces that are in the high school over here. Some of the challenges, purchasing and renovation costs that we'll talk about in a little bit. So another challenge is the existing building code calls this a business or a B occupancy. If we change it to an E or education occupancy, we're going to have to bring the building up to current code, which is doable and it's accounted for in the costs, but it's a challenge. We have spoken with the Orange County building official, and he's made clear what needs to happen. When we talk about bringing up to code, we're usually talking about life safety and accessibility. And so that involves fire sprinklers, egress, accessibility. Talking about there's some stairs that we'd have to accommodate there. Those are the big things that come up. Okay, so that's option D. Option E, the Wall Boulevard property again, acquire and build a new CTE facility. So similar to C, except you're building it closer into the campus. We think approximately 90,000 square feet of CTE could be built there. You could have an option to build part of it, maybe only half of it, or you could break it up into 3 30,000-foot chunks as you grow your program. So it gives you an option to build close into the school. Same advantages as the previous one. Some of the challenges, I think it's probably a longer lead time. Looking at a fall of opening in 2028 at the soonest. Option F is high school classroom and addition and the Wall Boulevard property renovations. So this one is acquiring the Wall property, leaving it as it is, not building new, but building new off the Selma Road side of your building as in a previous option. So this gets you up and running with your CTE right away, and for some of your technical hands-on type classes, and then some of your traditional classroom type CTE programs can happen in your addition there up front. I think some of the advantages and challenges have been said in previous options for both of those things. Okay, we've listed them here as well. So that runs through the 7 options. There are countless options. You could come up with 100 different options. We picked 7 that seem to make sense with what you have or what you could get. And that's what we looked at. For each of these, we put together costs. Because they vary in scope, they're not apples to apples. The costs are not going to be apples to apples, but we also, in our cost development, we are not trying to be the low bidder here. We're saying here's the range of costs, and we want you to know that it could be as much as this, or it could be as little as that. In each one of these options, once you decide something that you're interested in, your next step would be to maybe design exactly what would happen there, find out what the changes would be, or for a new building, exactly, we do geotechnical, looking into the soils below to make sure the site's good, and then we would do more finer cost estimating. But what you're looking at now is an order of magnitude. It should not be a number that you latch onto except for making relative decisions from one option to the next. Saying that, they are educated guesses based on our survey of the sites and experience in building CTE or just renovations in general. So we'd like to quickly go over the first one, option A, but we want to go through line by line so you can see how we built this. Dan, would you like to do this?
Sure, I can start. So like Rob said, we'll go through option A kind of line by line and just show everyone how these are set up, and then move a little faster through the other 6. It's important to note we attempted to identify any potential costs for each option, including relocation of programs if that's required. That's not a guaranteed cost by any means. We just wanted to include it in these cost estimates. So each one of these charts, and there's kind of a zoomed in version on the right, we'll start with kind of construction costs, have a subtotal for that, include any anticipated site work along with those construction costs, and then any of the ancillary expenses, soft costs, all of that. So you'll work down. For option A, we've got a 24,000 square foot addition in the front of the school. That's identified the top line. That 22,000 square foot addition in the rear of the building in the parking lot for CTE is the second line there, and there's a cost range for each of those based on a square foot number. Renovations to the high school, so those are renovations to the existing CTE space that's inside the high school, whether it's to improve the conditions of those or transform an existing classroom or CTE space to one or the other. And then renovations to the ag building. So we identified some costs for that, about 6,000 square feet there. So you come down, it's about 21 million to 24 million range for the construction costs. And then site work is 20% of that number. That's right under there. We have a price for expanding parking, relocating the tennis courts. That all accommodates that addition in the rear. And then demolish the wood frame building that JROTC is currently housed in. So some demolition costs. So the number we kind of want to look at is this total probable ad reno construction cost right here. So you'll get 25.7 to 29.8 million, along with non-construction costs. Those are geotechnical, all the investigations, design fees, furniture, testing, all of that stuff that is not part of construction. And then your probable total construction costs down there is the 28.3 to 32.8 million. We included a 20% project contingency for each as a, it's a buffer because these are, again, just cost estimates. So that would, if these were to be fully designed, that contingency would go down, reduce drastically, possibly become zero. But for now, that's included for each of these costs. So the two blue lines at the bottom, including that contingency, is that total number, and then a 5-year escalation from this year out to 2028, and that's your bottom line. So 5 years from now, that's what we may anticipate each of these options to cost.
Can I mention something?
Sure.
So on the contingency, the 20% contingency, as Dan mentioned, if you have a new building on a green field, you pretty much know everything. It's all right there, it's wide open. You might have something underground, but if you do enough geotechnical, you can really eliminate that as well. So, so that could be more like a 5% contingency. When you have, as Dan said, additions and renovations, we've never had one where you open it up and everything's perfect and in perfect shape. It's just like, so we do have to put that 20% contingency in there for unknowns. And then on the escalation side of things, escalation is not 3% a year every year. 3 years ago, it was 15 or 20% for that year. And some years it might be only 2%. So this 3% is what we see if you take out an anomaly like the pandemic. And even the pandemic escalation prices have come down somewhat, but we don't try to time a project on something like that. It's kind of like trying to be a day trader when you're really a carpenter. You got to go with what you need to happen. Now you might time something within like a 3 to 6 month period because you know that there's a shortage of steel or you can't get a hold of switch gear or whatever, and say let's hold off. But we don't recommend holding off on projects for market conditions. You do what you need to do, and you move forward and you get creative to deal with that. And we'll reiterate again, these aren't numbers to latch onto, but as we look at the bottom line for each of the subsequent options, you can kind of see an order of magnitude, and we can talk more detailed if you want to. Is option A really a $44 million option, and where are some of the savings, and we can get deep into these. So Dan, if you want to hit the high level on the next options.
Sure. We'll go through the rest of the options. B1, so again, these are not, based on the option, it's either add reno, maybe a new building. In the case of B1 and B2, these are all renovations and some site work. So you'll see costs up top for renovations, site work. We have a cost for upgrading electrical service and HVAC in this building. Again, possible costs for relocating some of the programs and functions that are here now. We had not identified, a place for those to move at this time. And then your total cost at the bottom.
So this option, B1, is, today's dollars, 38 to 44 million.
Yep.
Again, can be, scaled based on what actually happens here.
In B2, that was renovations in this building, but kind of the other side of the building to classroom space. So you'll have your renovation costs, a lot of the similar upgrade electrical service, HVAC, and then some possible lease costs for the administration functions there. So that total probable cost today's dollars is 25.6 to 29.1 million. Option C is the new building on the transportation facility. So we have new building construction, square footage for that, site work, a demolition price for the existing buildings that are there, and then again, a potential cost for relocating the transportation center and maintenance shop to a different site. So that cost range in today's dollars is 67.2 to 77 million.
My commentary on this one is during the description of that is you could break that up into phases. So phase one, which is maybe 30,000 square feet, would be a third of that, and a third and a third. So that's a way to also think about these cost projections.
And that will be the same for option E when we get there. And I will say the option C and E both show a brand new 90,000 square foot building. The major cost difference between C and E would be finding a new home for the transportation maintenance facilities in the county. Option D, so we've got money for renovating all the existing structures, again, bringing those up to current code, probably adding a sprinkler system, accessibility upgrades, and really converting the current or old use of the business and automotive shop to CTE functions. Associated site work for those, along with a dollar amount for the land purchase of the wall property. So the total cost in today's dollars, 14.1 to 16.7, and that is just renovating the buildings that are there. Option E again is similar to C, except on the wall property. So you've got the same price for a new building construction at 90,000 feet, site work for that building, the same amount for the land purchase of that property, demolition of the existing buildings that are there, site demolition. The total cost is 60.7 to 67.9 million. And then option F, as a recap, was kind of a blend of a portion of option A with the addition to the high school, as well as option D is renovating the buildings on the wall property. So you're going to see that classroom high school addition in the front of the high school. That gets rid of the modular trailers out front, expands classroom space in the high school, and also gives you CTE classroom space within the high school building. Site work for that addition, and then the same costs from option D there for renovating the existing structures on the wall property, along with land purchase. All of that totals up in today's dollars to 28.1 to 32.6 million.
Thank you, Dan. One of the last pieces of evaluation was the timelines. When do you want CTE to happen? And so we looked at each one of these options and we said, well, we think this would take 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. Again, similar to the cost estimates, these can all be modified. You can do things a lot quicker, and some things can stretch out a lot longer. But we had to make our best guess based on what we see, how long something would take. And so you can see about how long these different options, as described, we think would take. And that fed into our conclusions. What you see is the matrix on page 42. Really are some high-level ways to evaluate. And so we've got our first column of costs, the order of magnitude costs. The high school location, considering that it is more beneficial to have kids who don't have to be transported in order to learn again. So that's, there's lost learning time and then transportation costs. So that was a factor. Years before you could really get into the CTE use was a factor, as I just mentioned. Does the fourth column there, does the operation, does it mess with the existing learning that you happen. And that's obviously, if you can do something that doesn't mess with your existing learning, that's a benefit. And then it's not nebulous or arbitrary, but these each one of these options do have or don't have some contribution to the high school long term, either immediate or long term. And so for long term, the benefit of the solution to Orange County High School is shown there. So evaluating based on the costs, the location, the time, the impact, and the potential benefit. We did see option F, acquiring the Waugh Boulevard property and an addition to the front of the high school as standing out to us as something that has most benefit near and medium and long term of these options. So we always have limitations that we talk about. These disclaimers are not to disown. We 100% own what the study is, but as we've described, there's all sorts of things that ifs and ands and buts, and we haven't done geotechnical on any of these sites. So there are other considerations, but based on what we presented today, that's what we've come up with. The last pages are simply talking about some reminding the group of some past work over the past 15 years studying CTE in Orange County. And then the very last page is just an excerpt of that master plan that talks about the different phases. I mean, you've got the whole presentation that you guys have probably been through, but that's kind of helpful to look back at too. I think we've hit it all, and nobody's ever accused me of being too brief, so I apologize if that went longer than you wanted. But Ms. Page, we're at your direction, whatever you'd like us to do next.
Thank you. So I will ask current board members if you have any questions.
On option B1, as far as the 8,000 square feet, how many classrooms for CTE do you think we could accommodate in that 8,000 square feet? And then same for B2.
Okay. It depends on
28,000 square feet, I'm guessing.
Yeah. It depends on the programs that are chosen to go over here. You're going to have some programs that need a lot more space. So as far as the classrooms, right now there are about 12 classrooms in the Head Start area. Some of those we would probably blow out the wall in between two classrooms. And so it could be, it might end up being 6 classrooms. I think once we identify which programs you want to be over there, we'll tell you more, but 6 to 12 maybe.
So as far as HVAC, and maybe Doug can answer this question, I thought we currently have already started our HVAC work.
We have not in this building.
Okay.
I think it's the same as it was in 2013.
Okay, haven't had any proposals on that as of right now?
No, there's no budget currently. It was more crucial to us to do Orange Elementary first and then Gordon Water.
Gotcha.
So this one is future.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Anderson, with respect to HVAC here, or HVAC and CTE, it's a lot different than just regular traditional classroom HVAC, as you can probably imagine. Just the amount, the volume of air, so the size of equipment, and thus the energy draw, it's different. So we haven't gotten that deep, but that would be a consideration when we get there.
I figured the cost to do one or the other. If we've already planned for that, I don't want to do that and then know that our HVAC is going to be even more based off of that.
That's a good point.
Ms. Quintard, do you have any questions? She's still with us.
Chelsea?
Chelsea?
Sorry, the mute's giving me issues. No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Mr. Hopkins?
Not really any questions, but I'd just like to make a statement that I would like it to be located near the high school with one of those conditions. And I base this basically on talking to people over in Culpeper County. They're showing off their CTE center and they're very proud of it. I'm proud of it. It's a very nice building. But they will tell you privately that the mistake they made was not hooking it up with one of their high schools. The transportation is just messes up the schedules for all the schools, and they really had no reason to put it where it is. So, because they have two high schools that are close together and they just built that one high school, they had the land there, they could have put that CTE center right next to their, that school, and it would, now obviously, if you have two high schools and one has a CTA center and the other one doesn't, you work that out in scheduling as they come up to the 9th grade. The ones that want to take part in that program could be put in that school. And for Culpeper, it's easy because the two high schools are, 2 miles apart? So, from what they tell me, that's why I support having a CTA center, either on the Wall property or on the other one. That I don't make a, to me, it's not a big, I'm not going to be the decision maker anyway. So, but I'm a big fan of having the CTA center right where the high school is.
I agree with that. You know, we've seen the challenges of getting bus drivers and staff and busing kids around. And also I know that if you take kids too far off staff, then you gotta have your other teachers there to be able to teach them. So also you have to include feeding in that. If it's a 2-block kind of thing, you go transport. So, you know, it's always been my wish to have it somewhere close to the high school. And also, it looks like it can be seemingly a sooner issue getting kids in a building to do something than later. And that's one of my biggest concerns all along, is that, you know, we keep talking about CTE. I mean, I've been on this board for 12 years. We've talked about it for 12 years. And we've made great strides in-house to accommodate CE. And that's all due to the great people sitting behind me that's on staff to be able to pull that together. And I've said it all along, we just need more space. And in saying that, I feel like we're doing our kids a great service. We keep pushing that can down the wood, you know, down the road. We're looking at maybe 2 to 3 years, we can get kids in classes to do something versus 5 years or longer. No, that's just, to me, is unacceptable to our kids. So, if there are no more questions from the current board, I will open it to the incoming board. If you gentlemen and ladies have any questions, I'll entertain that.
So I'll probably jump around just a little bit. So the question that jumped out at me as you were going through the presentation, so in some of the examples, we're looking at a new building at 90,000 square feet. Then we're looking at some improvements or some additions that total in the 48 to 50 range.
Yes.
Give me.
Why?
Right. So do we have, do we justify 90,000 square feet, or are we justifying 50,000 square feet and we just took the property and put the biggest building that we could on it. I guess that's what I want to understand.
Yeah, our approach was to give you options. If you wanted to go all out now, here's a couple ways to do it. Or if you want to do something pretty modest, but will fill a need right away, that's the other extreme. So that's the range. With the all-out proposal, phasing is a good option if you don't want to go all out, but you want to do long-range planning. If the community has the continuous will to keep developing that out, then you have the long-range plan. Now, I know a long-range plan doesn't always stay there because you have change of direction. Either, you can possibly have change of direction, but the possibility for the two large facilities is there if that's something that you want.
Agreed. So, and you pulled up the one slide. I guess more specifically what I'm trying to ascertain from you is, based on projections over a 5 to 10 year out with population growth and our current student count, so we're max capacity at the high school right now, if not plus more, correct?
Yes.
Right.
From what we see, yes.
Right. So it comes down to dollars and cents. So a 90,000 square foot building is going to cost more than 2 additions, or you follow what I'm saying. So do you build a 90,000 square feet because you see the projections where it is a need, or is it a want? Is that more specific?
Yep. So I would say there that another piece that I believe your administration is looking at is demographics. And that's not part of this study. But what I will say to that again is that any one of these solutions are scalable. So whatever the demographics come up with, you build to that, whether it's a new building or additions, whether it's here at the TEAC or at the high school or even another location. So your demographics portion is important. It seems as though you're bursting at the seams and you wouldn't need any demographics to just go into the studios now and the labs now and see what's happening, the amazing things that are happening there, and you're bursting at the seams. You seems like you need more space now. It's probably not 90,000 square feet because programs don't usually ramp up in 1 year. And your administration has provided a plan that says, okay, step 1, this many square feet, these programs in this many square feet, step 2, these. So, you do have a plan to ramp it up. Whether you want to do that in 3 years or 10 years or 20 years would also factor into that decision. So demographics, to answer your question, I think demographics and those types of projections were outside the scope of this study, and I believe you guys are looking at that now.
Right. So your recommendation to determine the answer to the question is looking at population growth. I mean, as you well know, we're a large county. Yeah. We're wide.
Right.
So you would look at that and based on that start to make decisions and what is cost effective.
I think that's one piece of it. I think that is it's an important piece to make sure you understand your growth patterns. Yes.
Okay. You touch on relocation of programs. Okay, I understand. So, I'm brand new, so I don't know what the conversation looked like as far as what your parameters were. Mm-hmm. So let me just ask the simple question. The relocation of programs, you are not tasked to have an idea of where they were going. I'm to understand by reading this.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we had to come up with some ideas on what could happen, but as far as the specific program, we want to move this here, I'm not sure that we got that in that depth.
Right. So on the TEAC expansion, you've got $8 million in a relocation.
Yes.
Give me just a Reader's Digest version of where do we come up with $8 million and where, so is that, I think the terminology was a lease. So I think maybe what you're suggesting is we lease something and then relocate it, so the school system or the county will not own the building, so that's an additional cost. Just give me a little bit more on that additional cost and where that number came from.
Is that the lease number, the 8 million?
It is.
Okay, so I think what we said was you've got 20 some odd thousand of classroom space that we can't not include that, because if we're trying to do a complete project, you gotta have an idea of the cost. And so X number of square feet times X dollars a square foot for lease and renovation of that space wherever it is. We've seen plenty of school divisions lease space for programs, do a build out, convert it into classroom space. And that's the high level number that we put into here, just to make sure you understood your complete cost to make that happen.
Right. You built in contingency cost on a lot of the plans, but not in a relocation on purpose, or?
Do we have a contingency there?
Yeah.
So we have a 20% contingency on option B1 and B2 that would include.
That encompasses them all?
Yeah. Totally. And so that was, I believe that 8 million was a 10-year lease? 20, excuse me, a 20-year lease for those programs. Some space, and if you had a space that you owned right now that you didn't have to lease, that would change that calculus.
Yes, yes.
And if you're talking 5-year or 10-year, obviously that number changes, but that note at the bottom was meant to just kind of show the math on how we came up with that number, because we didn't want to put 0 there and have it be a surprise.
Yeah, I personally like your phased process plan, whichever the plan is, but the phased process, because it is an open building and, we have students and then this building and so forth. Anyway, I think I only have 2 more questions. I don't really see a ton of specifics on a new standalone building. You were not tasked to look at that.
We were not tasked to design the building. What that would be, if you decided to go that option, that's what you would do. We also saw where you had Grimm and Parker do a study that was very specific. We have done plenty of CTE projects with these programs in them. So at this level, at this high level, it didn't seem to be beneficial. It was really just determining how much square feet you need and would it fit on any one of these properties. So getting into the actual design is not part of our scope.
Yeah, I guess I worded it wrong. I wasn't talking about design as far as cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
So design of layout?
It just, you've got really good specifics on, what these options are going to look like for cost.
Yeah.
But then a standalone by itself. Am I missing something?
Sorry for my dense head here. I think you're saying we didn't get into specifics on the standalone. We did have costs per square foot.
Per square foot. Okay.
Per square foot, yeah.
Yeah. Last question, and then I will be quiet. So y'all had referenced when you started before that you've done this a number of times throughout the state. Mr. Hopkins referenced some conversations that he had with the people over in Culpeper. So again, this is a question based on your experience with other entities, other localities. What is the common theme of what the people that hired you, what did they feel like, man, I'm really glad I did that? And then the second part is, I really wish I didn't, or we hadn't have done that.
Yeah.
And it could be, hey, we didn't go big enough, we went too small, or as Mr. Hopkins, pointed out, I wish it was adjacent and, we didn't have to do a cafeteria, as Ms. Page brought up, and busing and so forth, so.
Every county and school division is different. And they all have different circumstances. And sometimes, you hear about the should-haves, I wish we had, and that seems to rise, to the top where you don't, this is great doesn't sometimes get as much press. So for example, in Isle of Wight County, their programs were right there at the high school. They were very happy with it, but they had one program, their ag program, that they made remote. They were very happy with that decision because they needed the land. There's an example of, not a project of ours, but in Loudoun County where they did one centralized remote CTE facility, but it's a big county and everybody couldn't get CTE because it's a big place and they all couldn't go there. And so they're now going back and putting them at select high schools. So it runs the gamut, I think.
Okay.
I don't know, you want to add to that?
Again, not our projects, but Henrico is finishing up building 2 ACE centers, they call them ACE. One on the east end and one on the west end of the county, and what that does is, it's not the same programs at each one. They take half and half, and if you're going to do welding, you go to one, or if you do ag, you go to the other, that sort of thing. But that's a way to, do those specialties on 2 different locations in the county.
Are any of those localities that you're referencing, do they do, I call it dual admission? Here in Orange County, our challenge is workforce. That's our challenge. Where we could do night classes or retraining of current people in the workforce.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that?
Yeah, dual enrollment is big.
Okay.
It's very big. In fact, the Culpeper that Mr. Hopkins referred to is located next to Germanna Community College for just that reason. And so the college students are able to use the facility, and then the kids at the high school can move right into classes that are right there at Germanna. So dual enrollment's a big deal.
And not only dual enrollment for high school kids, but the community college, whether they're college age or adults, can then use that CTE facility as well.
Yeah.
Well, I have 50 other questions, but I'm going to stop, and I thank you both very much.
I'll add one more thing about the workforce development. That can happen pretty much any of these options, whether it's on your high school site or it's here or another location. I think that's really important. I'm glad you guys are thinking about that.
Right.
Okay, Sandy?
Hi, thank you very much. I absolutely agree that the enrollment demographic study needs to be a part of this before any decision could be made in any capacity. We need to know whether we have the capacity, what our projected capacity is, what our growth is, to see if these are feasible or if they are going to need to be expanded due to that growth. I also absolutely agree with Mr. Hopkins and Ms. Page about the need to have it close because of the transportation issues. And there's also, of course, in the Lake of the Woods area, huge transportation issues just coming up to this end of the county for high school. So I don't know if there has been any consideration or any direction to you to take into consideration a second high school that is at a different area within the county. I'm looking at the dual enrollment question. It would possibly seem appropriate or maybe something to look at having another high school that maybe had either the academic or the CTE program that would align with the Germanna High School at that end of the county again, and being able to have that dual usage. So I don't know if you've had that or if that would be, again, another step after the enrollment demographic study.
Yeah, we did hear about that. We obviously understand the growth. We can see it firsthand. We have heard about the building permits, just the building permits alone that are happening on the east end of the county. So we understand that was not part of this study. One thing that we talk about in our near term, medium term, this is a near term, medium term, and then thinking about long term is what can happen. You want to grow your CTE now. So when you're talking about a new high school, how long? What's your outlook? Are you thinking in 5 years? Would it be 20 years? And so I think our focus was how could we help you now? But I think the second high school, or not a second high school, or a new one high school county. I mean, whichever way you go, those will all be borne out by demographics and funding and all that kind of thing. But it sounds like you want CTE now.
I think the community's ready for it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give the Board of Supervisors a chance to ask.
Diane.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, Ms. Page.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Well, I was gonna say, Jack and Sandy have pretty much already addressed my questions, and they're not really questions that you can answer, because it has to do with the long-term demographic. All throughout this past year, we've heard from the community about the students at the eastern end and the growth at the eastern end, and our aging high school at the western end. So my thought process is the wisdom of putting multiple millions of dollars into the current site, but balancing that with the immediate need for CTE that we've been talking about for 15 years. I know you don't have those answers, but that's where my head's spinning. How do we address the need long-term versus the need short-term, and be wise about investing?
We don't have all of those answers,
Right.
but we have an observation, and that's what factored into our conclusion that for relatively, I'm not saying this is inexpensive, but for among all your choices, a relatively inexpensive solution would be something on-site to a level that you could afford. And with the WA property, acquiring that property, again, relatively inexpensive, but also completes your high school property for whatever may happen down the road with it. It seemed to stand out to us from looking at all the options.
And you did say that each of the options was expandable for a program for...
Right, scalable, right?
Scalable, okay.
Start small or start big, your choice.
And with due respect to these gentlemen, and because the three of you really don't know, how we got to this conversation anyway was in a discussion about CTE, and Ms. Anderson, I think, had been up and toured this property. And so that began the conversations as to whether we could expand some CTE here or obtain property or what to do. So these gentlemen was given the scope of, could this building be easily retrofitted? The wall property be easily retrofitted with some adjustments at the high school? So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because I know you three didn't know, and to make sure that everybody got the scope of what the gentlemen were tasked to do. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will turn to my left to see if we have anyone over here that has any questions they'd like to ask.
It's always been my interest or experience that you look at the fine print at the bottom of the page. Can you give any cost estimates to what the note is as far as legal fees, furniture, computer books, educational equipment, and educational supplies? What I would imagine each and every one of these projects, it would be nearly the same. What do you think those costs would be?
You know, it's a little different when you own the property versus when you don't own the property, as far as, you know, acquisition costs. So that's a land cost, legal fees, whatever you have to, whatever your administration fees are to make these deals happen. The furniture, you know, we talk about FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and that's a real cost consideration with CTE. You know, if you're doing a welding lab, it's going to be a lot less expensive than, let's say, a legal program, you know, where it's a traditional classroom.
Just make it brief, could it add 20%, 30%?
You know, we look at it per, it depends, again. So like your building construction or some of the more technical could be as high as $40 a square foot, where some of the, you know, less technical, less hands-on type classes could be $5 a square foot.
So it really depends on the programs that you're going to provide.
Yeah. And the other,
regardless of the project, we're going to try to provide the same programs, right?
well, it depends on which option. So one option is going to be more conducive to another. Let me add to that also on the costs, and I'll use the Culpeper project as an example. The budget for all the FF&E for that project was, I want to say 2.5 million. It's 57,000 square feet. About a little over, well, more than $1 million of it was donated by the welding, Lincoln Welding, or the trainers, the guys that make the HVAC trainers. A lot of that was donated. Germanic donated it. And then another $1 million was purchased. So it depends on what program you have, how much they'll contribute. Like if you were to partner with one of your local businesses who really needs workforce development and say, yeah, we'll give you every one of those trainers. So your costs go down from $40 a square foot to $10 a square foot. Or, that's just an example of why we leave that out, because it really depends on the programs and your partnerships. So were there other costs? I understand what you mean about the fine print, and I want to be able to explain all of those.
Well, just to move forward just a little bit.
Sure.
I understand there's a balancing act between what's going to accomplish your short-term goals versus what may better be in your long-term interest.
Mm-hmm.
And, you may pick the cheap one 2 years into it, and you find out, well, maybe if I had waited 2 more years to really get what I want, I would have been in a better place.
Okay.
So, you're going to have to weigh that. I know there's a time factor. A lot of people would like to get things accomplished sooner rather than later, but, it's a balancing act as far as where your goals are better met, short-term or long-term. I think one of them brought up the question of fact, what is our other concerns and needs as far as other schools and how those programs are going to factor into how do we make this decision today. All that has to take into account. To piggyback on what Jack said, also another point we need to make is where is our needs as far as square footage? One of these programs is 40,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. I see here on one page up to 105,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. I think that's where we need to make a decision. Where do we need that number to be? 100,000 square feet, that's a tremendous building. That's 100 wide by 1,000 long. In comparison, how big a building did Culpeper put up?
57,000.
57. So do we need a project twice as big as Culpeper?
That's your long term. If you want to have those programs that you guys are shooting for as a school division, these are the programs that you want to deliver, and it may not be in the next 5 years. So that's one of the reasons I mentioned a phased approach. Probably with one of these big new standalone buildings, you probably do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. You design it now, and then you build a third, and as your program grows into the next, you add on.
Right.
That's just an option for what you're talking about.
Without really getting into the numbers, one of the big questions that I have is, which one of these projects most resemble maybe what Culpeper did? And Culpeper, basically, they bought a piece of property and they put up a CTE center. Mm-hmm. And I would suggest perhaps E most resembles what Culpeper did. Mm-hmm. But when I look at the cost of what you're projecting versus what I was told, and I was under the understanding Culpeper put their facility in for about 18 million. You're projecting if we buy the wall property on 4 acres, it could be 58 million.
Yeah.
Or 68 million.
Yeah.
That's 50 million above what Culpeper was able to do it for, not counting with the additional costs in the fine print.
Well, they are 2 different buildings. So we're talking, the cost you see here, 68 million would be for 90,000 square feet on acquired property, which represents not a lot, maybe 3 million. They are leasing their property for 40 years for $1 a year from Germana. And so they really didn't have much in the way of cost there. And then it's maybe about half the size.
50 million is a huge difference.
Yeah, it is.
And I think we would all be more than glad to have what Culpeper has.
Yeah, well, we can certainly take Culpeper, plop it onto, a site that you have that you want to move forward with and evaluate that for cost. That total was like a $21 million project, and it was bid in 2019, So the costs are a little bit different now,
I can understand.
not 50 million, but it's also half the size of what this is.
But we really need to consider that
Yeah,
in comparison to what we're looking at now.
yeah,
If the disparity between the numbers is this great.
yeah. This option E is not a Culpeper CTE.
No, but I'm just saying, E is acquiring property
Yeah.
to build a CTE.
Yeah.
Much the same as what Culpeper did.
Yeah, and that can be evaluated, yep. I think
That would be my point.
it'd be straightforward analysis, yes.
Okay, Ms. Hale, or you want to add?
I would just first thank y'all for the work that you've done, for this presentation. It's very informative. I do think there are a lot of, it generates for me a lot more questions that I'm not going to ask right here, but certainly in agreement with Mr. Marshall, and that I'm very curious about if we did something more comparable to what Culpeper has done. And you know, I'm just hearing different things about how well that is working. Also hearing a little bit about how much of that is actually utilized. Anyway, I think it would be interesting. But I think there's some more options that potentially were thought of or stumbled upon after you were tasked with this. So of course I'm interested in learning more about that, but I don't know if that would be a possibility if you're tasked with providing more information on the Culpeper piece, if we could potentially have other options looked at as well. That's all I have.
I think keep in mind when you're talking a lot about Culpeper and a building that's, I guess, essentially between their two high schools. The programs that they have in there are their heavier trade and industrial double blocked classes. Each school still has their own JROTC, right? We know that our JROTC building is not adequate. And so we're looking for solutions to issues that we have that are unique to us. You know, all of their business and marketing are still in their high schools, right? They travel for automotive. They travel for, I'm trying to think, some of the other
Building trades.
building trades. And
Nursing.
so, and they'll travel in the morning, or they'll come, and the students will start their day there. They'll spend their first 2 blocks, and then they're traveling back to their buildings kind of over the lunch shift so that they're not cutting into their instructional time in their other blocks, right? And so there's a lot outside of just, and I think what these gentlemen are trying to get to, it's a difficult, because it's not apples to apples, because we're trying to solve some additional problems. Like they weren't trying to gain classroom space that I can see from the seat, because I don't know, they're necessarily removing programs out, right? So we have some other issues that we're facing that are separate from Culpeper as well. So when we think about the programs and what would go in, you know, their building it's nice, but it's basic. It's rectangular with a hallway down the center, with large open areas to do CTE
Very
work.
specific.
Very specific for the programs that they had identified that they want. And so that is just a portion of the difference based on the programming that's in that building compared to some of the things that we have been looking here, because we're trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Right? We know we have a space issue. We know nobody's particularly fond of the modulars in the front of the building. Nobody's particularly fond of the JROTC building. Nobody's particularly fond of the ag building, quite frankly. And so those are some other unique challenges that we face. So we're certainly happy to continue to engage with you. I know you would help us do that work, but just.
Oh yeah, certainly we'd be happy to do an analysis of a 57,000 square foot building on, you know, if you have a piece of property that's connected or currently part of the high school to achieve what we're hearing.
Well, we also have to keep in mind when we're looking at this, staffing is a huge issue in many walks of life, particularly education. So when you go back to scalable, I'll just tell you, my point of view is it doesn't make sense to hurry up and build the grandiose, you pick your number. You look at what is feasible to hire for, what can we fill with the equipment, right? If we're gonna put in an auto tech lab or an auto body shop, that's a considerable price difference with lifts and paint booth and everything from a carpentry lab, for instance. And so we really need to look at those, decide where we want to go, and it would be preferable to phase and scale. That probably makes the most sense for us.
Mr. Van Houten, did you have a question?
Sure. So I'm also very new to this. So I'm not as in-depth as let's say some of you all are on this, but I am not a proponent of throwing good money after bad. Okay, so if we're going to phase ourselves out of something in 2, 3, 5 years, we're not talking about $20 or $30. Even the cheapest options are $30 million. Okay, I understand there's a lot of fluff in these things, and that's fine. So if you want to drill that down and cut it in half, it's $15 million that have to come from all the local taxpayers. And then we're going to abandon ship and we're going to move to another master plan. So I personally, without knowing as much as everybody else knows, would say, hey, wait a minute, don't knee jerk. We absolutely have to get CT at a better scale than what it is today. I'm 100% fan of that. But if we can all just drill back a second and say, hey, what's our master plan? Are we going to be a 2 high school town? Are we going to be a 1 high school town? What are we going to be? I don't care if you're taking $5. Plan it to what the master plan is going to be. Now, you can scale any master plan. Okay, Rome wasn't built in a day either, but they envisioned Rome. So what we need to do is we need to say, hey, where is this stuff going to be? You can start a CTE in a 10. So it's all a matter of just saying, where do we want this stuff? Let's not just start throwing money around, be the hero for 3 or 4 years, and then, 2 school boards later, or 2 board of supervisors later, or whatever goes on. Oh my goodness, we had explosive growth over here, and we did the wrong thing. And now we got more infrastructure over there that we're going to have to find something to do with. So I'm struggling with all these options. I'm just being honest. We own certain buildings. We need certain things, but we've got to know what the master plan is going to be. What are we looking like as a town 10, 20 years down the road? Someone over there mentioned, I don't remember if it was Jack Darling, what's this county look like from an education need 10 years from now, right? We better figure that out. We're going to go out here and waste $20 million and we're not accomplishing anything. But about the time it's finished is about the time we're looking at the next thing we got to do. That's just my opinion, but again, I should probably mute this because
Makes a lot of sense.
So I thank you gentlemen for being here and bringing some options and presenting what you were tasked to present. Okay, that was great. So it sounds like at some point that maybe going forward that these 2 boards probably ought to maybe have some conversations, sit down and maybe even do some work sessions and get together and maybe come back as to what they would like to move forward and more studies or whatever to be done. It's what I'm hearing, is what it sounds like to me. And I'm looking at you guys because I'm not going to be here. So if that's, what the suggestion is,
Yeah, I think taking an approach as a whole between the school board and the board of supervisors and getting together and kind of hammering out what our long-term range is going to look like, whether it be some central location, multiple high schools, whatever that may be, because, I agree with a lot that was said here. We've done the study, we understand what our capabilities are as far as what we have existing, but understanding, you know, the cost that involves in that. And, you know, we have facilities, some of them are underutilized, some of them are overutilized. So, you know, there obviously, there needs to be some type of short-term effect of how we get to what basically we need. Maybe it's just going back and studying our programs and really finding out what we as a county need versus offering everything. I think that would be also something we need to discuss as well. So I agree that, you know, getting together and understanding what the long-term project looks like and making sure that we're all on the same page.
So again, gentlemen.
Hey, Chair, this is a public meeting, right?
Yes.
I'd be interested in hearing if there's anybody in the public who would like to make comment.
We're
We have a lot
11:26.
at stake too.
Well, I'm going to defer to these gentlemen because I don't know what their time frame is, their schedule is. So I don't know if they need to be somewhere else.
Who's
And I
down?
also
You
know
want-
that you're
you
going to
want our
probably.
time? Let's hear.
We got all day.
Madam Chair, I also have another question that came up too.
Sure.
And this one might be more for Dr. Hornick. I was interested in finding out how many programs we have that actually end up with certifications for trades upon graduation. I don't know if you have that number with you, but I think that would be important as we continue with this conversation. And before we close out, I would also like to ask that we go ahead and schedule a work session with the Board of Supervisors and School Board if that's possible as well.
Renee?
Want every the number of all certifications, Ms. Clinton? Or are you looking at just trade and industrial because?
Yeah, these conversations go.
It would be employable certifications for career technological education classes that we have.
Get back to that.
Oh, yeah.
I would suggest that.
Chelsea, can we save that until you guys maybe come up with a work session? Do you guys as a board have a meeting? And you guys as a school board can discuss that and then head in the direction of a joint meeting with the supervisors. That I would suggest.
Well, if we don't have the information, that's fine, but if we do, I think it would be important for this conversation as the community's hearing and, you know, we're all here and we're discussing this. I think it's an important piece of the information.
Yeah, we do have it, but then so in the interest of time and longevity for everybody, this was just an informational meeting to have RRMM present this. And I mean, and being respectful to them and to everybody else, I do think there is gonna be time to have more of those discussions. So I would just respectfully ask that we leave it here. And as a new board convenes, you guys decide in what direction, because I think these gentlemen have done what we've asked them to do today. They presented what they were directed to do on a short scale. They've done that beautifully. And so I think at this point, we need to leave it where it's at. You guys convene and get together and decide which way you want to go with the rest of it.
Ms. Page, is it all right if Mr. Marshall, I mean, I don't know if anybody, I personally would like to see if there's anyone in the audience that may have a question. Maybe no one does. I'm interested as Mr. Marshall is.
Well, respectfully, Madam Chair, I'm sorry to cut in, but I would like that information to be shared if we have that. I think that's important to the discussion that we're having with determining what level of additions we may need as a school. So I would appreciate if we have the information, if you could just share a ballpark number of how many certifications that we have with the career technological education.
So for this school year, we have, let's see, we plan to offer, you want like specific ones or just a ballpark number?
Just ballpark numbers so we know kind of what we're looking at right now, what we have that's currently employable upon graduation.
Chelsea, would it be okay while Renee is looking that information up, can we take some questions from the public that's here? So that the architects would be able to complete their day?
Around 20.
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted to have the information if possible before we close down.
Chelsea, I'm sorry, Ms. Quintern, this is around 20 that we're planning to offer this year. Last year, it's about the same number of certifications that we offer that range anywhere from like a financial literacy thing, like the WISE test, all the way up to Revit, AutoCAD, a Python certification for programming, our nursing certifications, our cosmetology certifications, our CompTIA Network Plus, our Security Plus, our Microsoft Office, beef quality assurance, AutoCAD. Those are some of the examples.
Okay, thank you.
So now, are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I got a couple. My concern would be, there's 8 things here. How many students are currently enrolled in CTE? What are they studying by category? You know, a list provided in the study, but we need to know what each course is active. How many students are in each category? Exactly where each category is conducted, in other words, what facility, so we can figure out the space, because we're talking 100,000 square feet of space being forecast to house the future CTE. Well, I'd like to know where all these people are right now, and what spaces are being utilized. Your drawing illustrated some spots, but you can't really determine from that what the square footage is in each facility. Specifically, what new classes will be offered? What is the plan to bring new classes online? In other words, they won't drop in the bucket automatically initially, but gradually as these classes are introduced, how are we going to start? Which ones we're going to pick to initiate the beginning of the CTE growth, let's say? And can additional permanent space be consolidated in some way, shape, or form to accommodate the anticipated growth that we're looking at for CTE? Thank you.
Mr. Weibel, can I have you email your questions? Thank you. I think that will help also in inference of that. And so, anyone else, any questions over here? Okay. Again, I will leave it up to the 2 boards going forward to convey with meetings and moving forward. Again, gentlemen, I thank you. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.